Hi there, and welcome to the ECM podcast. I'm Friedrich Kunzmann, and I'm excited to be hosting this newest episode of the podcast and take you behind the scenes of new music on ECM records. In this episode, I'm catching up with Norwegian pianist and composer Tord Gustavsen, whose newest trio album for ECM, called Opening, was just released. In our conversation, Tord talks about what happens when you're able to channel spontaneous inspiration into your music, the new addition to the trio on bass, how songs just come to him in the spur of the moment, and much more. Welcome to the podcast, Tord.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
I'd love to just start talking about the album right away, the new one, Opening, because I feel that it seems to lean towards a slightly more obscure side, one that favors very alert and soft interplay over the big melodic gestures. And I was wondering, did you deliberately choose to go that way after the somewhat more immediate quality of your last album, The Other Side?
I don't really think a deliberate decision would have worked so well, because like having strategies clearly thought out never really worked for me. It's more like seeing it when looking back that was actually what happened, for a number of reasons. One being the situation during the recording, which favored that kind of playing, and another being the kind of interplay opening with our new bass player. A third being just basically to have less control in a way, to dive into a space where I, to an even lower degree, direct the tracks or the tunes into melodic, pre-composed structure. Rather, the pre-composed material is there in our shared space, so to speak. We all know the tunes, but we don't have to play them. We start somewhere, and sometimes we really don't know where it's going. We just start with me playing one note on the piano, and we see what's happening from there. We may come into a pre-composed thing, or we may not. Other times we say, yeah, let's play this tune, but I introduce it in a totally different way than I've done before, and the others respond to that, and that can lead to the melody not coming at all, or the melody coming towards the end, or the melody being played as fragments rather than as a normal melody from beginning till end. And that way of playing feels very fruitful with us three here and now.
And like you just mentioned, you're in a kind of different situation than the last time around for several reasons. But one very obvious reason is that you have a new bass player, Steinar Raknes.
Yeah.
And what made him the best fit for your trio, and how has he changed your and Jarle Vespestad's sound in the trio?
Well, he's the best fit at this point for a number of reasons. He has a very warm sound in his bass, very strong, sensuous way of providing bass fundamentals. Then he is a virtuous soloist, both in terms of more traditional bass soloing, jazz bass soloing, but also in terms of working with effects and playing high pitch things, and basically he's a bit more bold in a way, and our approach is subtle, and my approach was always on the side of I can be I can be bold in my way, but I always start from a very subtle, low volume, meditative point of departure. And then
Yeah.
having a bass player in the setting that really respects that and also loves to play in a humble way, but still is basically a bit more a bold guy, with a more striking soloistic approach.
Mm.
Uh,
Some of that is obvious in tracks like Ritual, for
yeah,
example,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Where,
And for him, playing like that comes very natural, and he enters the stage just as much as a soloist as a bass player. And then we take it from there. And had he not been a very humble and a very musical guy, also, that would have, of course, then been a problem. But since he is also those things, then it's just a very cool challenge for myself and Jarle, how to interact with that, how to shape our playing so that we make the most out of this setting.
and in addition to him being a new addition to your trio, you'd mentioned that you've been doing an unusually large amount of solo gigs during the past year or
Yeah,
2 years.
yeah, that's true.
Does the solo exercise does that work figure on this album in a way? Do you feel that it was part of the process?
I think so. Reason number one being that the solo concerts I also normally play in a very uh, free-flowing way, with themes entering the stage and then fading away, and one theme transitioning into a totally free section, transitioning into another theme without being pre-planned. The solo concerts I actually normally do more or less without any stopping, just going for 1 hour straight. And this kind of, and of course, my playing is still melodic. It's still lyrical, because those are my main passions, to create um, to create memorable melodic moments, but they come about in a different way. And that's also a bit what happened during the recording of this trio album. It's very lyrical, but it's lyrical maybe in a more mysterious way, I think.
There's more meditation on very few chords, maybe on very subtle interaction between you three.
Yeah, yeah, and that's often happening a lot also during the solo concerts, building very slowly from a drone or a scale or a mode, very few chords, and then expanding into bitonality to get into a bit nerdy theoretical landscape here, where
Please do.
yeah, where you stay in one mode long enough that another one can establish like a second layer, and that this richness establishes itself as something very different from chord changes. It's more about states and putting states on top of each other than it is about a song having a pre-composed chord structure.
Okay.
And in addition to this aspect of flowing freely in and out of themes, there's also the aspect of playing in a concert hall with fantastic natural acoustics on a really, really good grand piano, in inviting actually me to be more of a pianistic piano player, so to speak, than on the albums made in the studio with headphones. So I noticed that the piano sound on this album is better than we have ever had before, and I noticed when playing that I was able to go further in engaging deeply with the instrument, and having more nuances between pianissimo and mezzo forte. It was this whole spectrum of using the touch on the piano in a more nuanced way came to me. And I think that had a lot to do with playing more solo concerts and the way the piano and the room responded there and then when we were recording.
And when we talked before, you said that some of your best songs over the years kind of just fell into your lap. Like you didn't even have to try and they just came to you. Which of the songs on opening came that easily, would you say?
Some songs came that easily. Some songs come with a hook or a major musical motive very easily, but then I really have to work on how to build them or how to make them grow up, so to speak. But on this album, the first song, the opening song called Circle, came like that. The main motive just fell into my head, so to speak, while fooling around with the piano. But then how to carry it through was I worked with it for a week. So it was a combination of those approaches. And the tune called Opening came about on soundcheck once. And that also often happens, but when we try the instruments, when we set the sound, I just get inspired by something in the room or by something one of the others do, and then if I believe in it, I try to just record it on my mobile phone there and then, or play it again so that there is a chance that I'll remember it. And sometimes good things come from this, from these situations.
That's cool. It must be interesting because you're probably kicking around material a lot before you come to the recording session, and you're like very meticulous about every step of the way, and then you end up there and suddenly something completely new comes to you, and it probably something else that you prepared has to make way for it in a way.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one of the most fascinating and also challenging but extremely rewarding aspects of recording like this. It's really an in the moment thing. The whole album is recorded in less than 2 days and mixed the following half day, and that's it. And then having the right balance between vision and active an active urge to bring something into it on the one side, and then total openness for what actually sounds better there and then, for how the room responds, how the instrument responds, and what the producer brings into it as a fourth member of the band. This combination of vision and openness, if you will, and of being strong yet being totally receptive and softening your edges in a way. It's so beautiful when that comes together in a good way. And then, for instance, in this session, it came together with a couple of the songs being quite a lot recorded in the same way, so to speak, or with the same approach as we did in the rehearsal room, whereas others been switched totally around, different tempo, different groove, cutting out the melody, just having a bit of a melody in the end, things that we hadn't done with the tunes beforehand. So an album, when recording in this way, is shaped by this synthesis of vision and openness in the moment.
And you just mentioned the producer, in this case, of course, Manfred Eicher, being the fourth member of the band in a way. You've worked with him for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And how is he a part of the process of forming these songs that you're performing?
He's part of the process in very much sharing what his experiences are there and then. He doesn't know the material before we enter the studio, and so his ears are then totally fresh and totally responding to how it feels then from, so to speak, an outsider, but then an outsider who is very much involved, and the more we play, it gets more and more to be also inside the band organism. And it's very healthy to have then this set of ears, this set of experience that he brings to it, to say, yeah, this is a good idea, but it's not really coming across, or yeah, this is fantastic. Let's not do it again. Let's just keep the first take and move on, or this might be a good song for later, but I don't feel that it's working now. And like this combination of gentle and critical entering into the process is very healthy. And sometimes his role is more like observing and letting us do our things and then selecting the tracks in the end. Other times his role is more active, going in and saying, I feel on this track, why don't you try this instead? Like actually being then quite active also, and he moves very fluently between these different aspects of producing, which is very cool, because that also brings in a dynamic and another layer of creativity in the process.
You also mentioned that you've been learning folk tune arrangements by the late great pianist Jan Johansson.
Yeah.
By heart,
yeah.
Just for practice.
Yeah, that's right.
Where on opening does this reflect, and how?
I think that me working with these traditional Swedish folk songs made famous by Jan Johansson several decades ago, not just being on the surface of them, but actually learning them by heart and playing them quite a bit during the Corona times, that it worked its way into my phrasing on almost all of these tracks, sometimes clearly showing itself clearly, and other times just in the background. There are these ornamentations and the kind of motives that are melancholic / uplifting in a very Scandinavian way that just happens more now than in the first albums I made, and I think that's gotten even clearer on the last album, probably because of my involvement with these tunes. And we also played one of the dance tunes from this collection that did not make it to the album, but which we will do in concerts. And in the end of what became track number 2, there is also a direct quote there from one of these folk tunes. Like, again, if I had planned to do that as a strategic homage, so to speak, it would never have worked. That's not the kind of planning that works for me, but we had played a long drone of free improvising things that became both Messiaen type open tonality and quite bluesy, and then all of a sudden this motive from the Visa från Rättavik fell into my head, and it fitted,
Yeah.
and then that basically concluded the spontaneous composition process. And so there is also then this direct quote.
And your colleagues pick up on that in a way.
Yeah, they also know these things. They are quite canonic. Do you say that material for Scandinavian musicians? We all heard it as children, I think.
It's part of the repertory.
Yeah,
you come with it.
Yeah.
The album closes with 2 other folk songs. Could you talk about whom they're by and what stories these tell?
Yeah.
Last time around, you talked about Fløjtelåt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Fløjtelåt. Yeah. Strictly speaking, they are not folk tunes, although
Okay.
they resemble that. Fløjtelåt was composed by late Norwegian composer Geir Tveit, who was a very special figure, doing huge orchestrations and piano concertos and orchestral pieces in a very special way of bridging the European classical tradition with Norwegian folk heritage, developing his own approach to tonality and to scales. And enough said about that. He also composed some very memorable melodies that made their way into the songbook, basically the collection of songs held dear by many Norwegians, and also having beautiful poems to them. So this tune, Fløjtelåt, is one that I grew up with singing even in school and other places. And it's a theme that also just basically fell into my head when we were improvising once with the trio, and I found it really fitting very well to the landscapes we had developed, and then we again did it in the studio also very spontaneously. But the lyrics there are about making a flute out of wood, and it's metaphorically about opening yourself to be played by the wind, to be played by inspiration or by God or whatever you want to call those forces of creativity and loving creativity. And of course, when we play an instrumental version, you don't have to know that, but to me it's very meaningful, because that's a lot what the process of reshaping the trio after having to change bass player is about, to opening yourself to here and now, to what is now the situation, and finding gold, so to speak, instead of lamenting what is no longer there. And it's about opening yourself and trying to soften your edges and release your blockages, so that you can be a vehicle for inspiration. And so playing this tune Fløjtelåt in the way we do is also saying just that. And then the closing piece of the album, Vær sterk min sjel, is a piece taken from the Norwegian hymnal book. So it's a hymn often used in churches, composed by Egil Hovland, who is one of the major composers of hymns in the last century in Norway. Fantastic melody, and also there with lyrics that are important to me. It's about staying afloat, staying strong in times of crisis, basically, and about finding where you can go for comfort, and like real sustainable comfort, not just things that wash off and things that are kitschy, but the kind of comfort that really carries you through.
That was Tord Gustavsen talking about his new trio album, Opening, out on ECM Records. Thank you for joining me in the ECM podcast. I'm Friedrich Kunzmann, and I look forward to sharing more new music with you very soon.